quite a momentum that's beginning to take place in communities. And I have to say that communities, I think, are the most important piece of this. And the reason is that people are operating in their silos, the medical community or the mental health or education, but you really need to work together. And this was brought home to me when I was doing the story in Walla Walla, because the social worker told me a story that of an interaction that she'd had with the local police chief, who they were talking about a kid, and the police chief just stopped and said, we've been dealing, you and I, with the same 12 extended families for the last 3 or 4 generations, and we haven't helped any of them. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to start working together, and in Walla Walla they are. The Jefferson County Public Health Department in Port Townsend, Washington, they work with a lot of low-income families, and in addition to the kinds of screening they do for tobacco and HIV and anything else for pregnant women, they will also ask them now about their ACEs. And they educate them about what the ACE study is all about. And there have been a couple people who said, it has nothing to do with me, but that's like one in all the people that they've addressed. Almost everybody else will say, now my life makes sense, and I don't want to pass this on to my children. So there are pediatricians who are screening for ACEs. There are hospital emergency departments that are using screening for ACEs. There are hospitals that are screening for ACEs. And there's child protective services that are now becoming completely trauma-informed. San Diego is in that group. And so that is remarkable, the changes that they're putting into place there, with great results. This is Dave Lockridge. He used to be a pastor in Merced, California. His aha moment came when Dr. Folletti came and talked to the hospital where his wife is, I believe she's director of medical education, something like that. And he realized that in his trying to help his most needy parishioners, he was doing it all wrong. And so he closed the church, and he went back to school and he got a psychology degree, and then he developed a workshop, I think it's something like 36 weeks long, and developed a workbook in which he married the epidemiology, the ACE study, the neurobiology of the effects of toxic stress on children's developing brains, and Bible studies, and started doing workshops around Merced. And I think he runs 3 or 4 now. Then he also did workshops for pastors in the Central Valley, or anybody who wanted to come, to tell them about this too, because what's really true, and Dr. Folletti has mentioned this, is there aren't enough therapists or enough money in the world for everybody to get therapy for the child adversity that they have experienced. And so you need to equip other people who will have contact with people who need help, and who are trusted by people to actually be able to help them. And he's had some amazing effect down there. He's also been doing some secular work with 0 to 3, First 5 here in California, 0 to 3, and also some schools in Merced. Yep, not done yet. So this is ACEs Connection. I'm going to go to the site, show you some things. Oh, hold on a second, let me see if I can get this. I may not. All right, so I'll be scrolling around this way to show you some things. So ACEs Connection, as I mentioned, is a social network. And it's not going to let me move around. Oh, there we go. Okay. So there are about 1,000 members now, actually 964, but almost, I think we'll get to 1,000. The rate has been increasing lately. I think we'll get to 1,000 by next month. They come from all walks of life. So it's people from criminal justice, it's people from child protective services, it's social workers, physicians, you name it, they're here. And what we do on here is everybody can essentially post information on there. People friend each other, just like in Facebook, so they can send messages to each other, they can start discussion groups. What we offer is this very chunky area right here, which is a resource center that has links to evidence-based practices, a toolkit, useful research, presentations, if you want to do a presentation for anybody about this. There's a bunch on there, including a really good one from Arizona that you can use. I think we have something like 90 events coming up. We'll follow all the events that have anything to do with trauma-informed practices or ACEs. We have a bunch of videos and photos. We also have groups. That's kind of interesting. These are subgroups on this main social network. So there's a pediatrics group, there's a books group. One is NorCal Acers. We occasionally get together. This one is really interesting. The Academy on Violence and Abuse started a private group and brought physicians in, and they're writing an ACEs white paper for physicians, so that this is something in physicians' language, so they can see what the latest research and practice is, and so they'll start spreading the word in there. We are developing a map of everybody who's on the ACEs Connection site, so that you can search by profession and find people in your nearby area. That'll be out next month as well. So one thing that, because of the way it's set up that I can't show you here, is how people help each other. So for example, there was a woman in North Dakota who looked through everything that was happening on ACEs Connection and said, I want our community to be a trauma-informed community. How do I do that? Well, the people in Tarpon Springs and Philadelphia and San Francisco contacted her and said, okay, here's how you start. There's a woman in the Netherlands who's a child psychologist, and they had integrated trauma-informed practices in their CES agency, and now she wanted to bring it to the schools because the schools didn't have it. And so she put the question out there, and she was just inundated with people saying, you know, here's a workbook you can use, here's a book, here's some people your teachers can contact, and all this is just sort of happening every day on ACEs Connection. And I think it's a really, really good resource for people who are moving ahead in this arena. So my message really is that all these people on ACEs Connection, you know, plus quite a few others that aren't on there, including all of you, are part of a huge, grand, wonderful, culture-changing, society-changing, social movement. And until this year, I think most of the pioneers in this movement have been working in their own silos. And what I really see this year is now people working across silos to say, you know, we're talking the same language, we have some of the same issues, we are much stronger if we work together. So let's figure out a way to get together and how we can support each other. Because I really believe that by working together, that we will also get to the point someday that when a parent hits his child, that he will be in a community where he knows that it's not the child who's bad, it's he who has some issues, and that he will go and get help, and there will be plenty of places to get help. And if he happens to go to his doctor might say, eat cucumbers 3 times a day and lay off meat for 3 weeks. Thank you. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Yes. Yeah. some hints? Oh, sorry, yes, I will. Is there any link between ACEs and Alzheimer's? Is that?
Well, has there been any study of unresolved problems? That unresolved childhood trauma, connection between unresolved childhood trauma and adult.
Okay, I don't know about unresolved childhood trauma, but I do know that some people are starting to look at the link between childhood adversity and Alzheimer's. Now, the reason they're doing that is one thing that I didn't mention in this discussion, which is the fourth piece of the research that just really gelled last year. And that was that the other thing that happens when you are experiencing childhood adversity is that not only is your brain changing physiologically, structure and function, but you're laying down inflammatory substances in your organ systems. And so those can actually lie dormant for a long time. And that's why you have what Dr. Felitti was talking about is, people have heart attacks who, aren't overweight, don't have a high cholesterol. It's like, where did that come from? And now they're thinking it's coming from these inflammatory substances that are laid down that long ago. And that's another argument for doing everything we can to build resilience factors into individuals, families, communities, agencies everywhere. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, I know that the family court scandal ties in really well with ACEs, but I don't think it's on the ACEs connections or the ACEs too high right now. Do you think there would be some way of bringing it in, because you're doing such a good job of getting these trauma-informed processes going in the country? Do you have any ideas of how maybe that could also be used to help with the family court situation?
Well, two things. One, I really am chomping at the bit to do some reporting on that. At the moment, what is putting bread and butter on the table is the series that I'm doing on school discipline. And once that's done in July, then I can get to that. But the other way, which I think is really important, there's a list of about 60 stories that I want to do that are not just family court, but a lot of other things that are just as significant that are going on in this arena. And where they have come from is people on ACEs Connection. So I would say get on ACEs Connection and start being visible there. If you're interested, form a group. Say, hey, make contact with people in domestic violence and CPS and whatever. Saying, I think we're on the same page here. How can we work together on this? And I see some of that happening on ACEs Connection, and that's what it's really for, is to have people do this linking. Yeah.
Yes. I come from an educator's point of view. And are you a psychologist then?
I'm just a journalist.
I'm a journalist. Interesting. Okay.
But I came from science into journalism, but not psychology. Marine biology, there's a big connection there.
I was just curious because I see sometimes, I'm semi-retired now, I'm retiring, but I see sometimes the point of view, in the classroom setting. Some teachers have empathy and understanding and they can work with it. With the No Child Left Behind, so many teachers are finding themselves in the gun pressure-wise, and some of them pulling away emotionally because they're trying to get all the points and all the little grades. And after having taught up years and seeing what's happening, that concerns me because some of the children feel disconnected. They feel like they're not honored or cared about. It's all the grades and how they test out. Some teachers can still keep the balance, but this kind of program would be wonderful because I'm noticing some of the newer teachers, because of what they're learning in school, they come in with like a business. We've got to get those points, got to get those grades, and that's all that counts. But at the same time, the children, many of them are performing because they want to please, because they're feeling good about being cared about. And when you start disconnecting that, you have more children, stopping school at a certain age or getting involved with drugs or whatever. I know I'm talking No Child Left Behind. I'm not in favor of it because of the negative aspects of it. It sounded good, but more and more educators aren't as much in favor. But if we can get back in the caring mode And yes, you're important as an individual, whether you get it the top grade or not. We still care about you. I think that is very important, particularly for children that have been abused at home or neglected or left alone. If they feel somebody cares, and that's why it's so important to bring it back to the schools.
Yes.
And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I've visited quite a few schools that have actually now put that system into place. And I was just in Spokane last week visiting, and it was astonishing.
I'm from Spokane.
Oh, good,
So
good.
Spokane Public Schools?
Uh-huh.
And who are you working with?
Actually, it's several school districts in and around
Yeah.
Spokane.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So the teachers are absolutely under pressure
Tremendous.
to test. You know, that's all it is. But what they're understanding once they implement this trauma-informed approach is it actually helps them.
Yes.
They're more effective, and the kids actually test out better. And
That's
all
right.
the schools that have implemented this have seen their test scores go up.
Because they're cared.
Yeah, exactly. And the kids understand this too. So an elementary school that I went to, this principal was just amazing. In her office, there are weighted blankets, there were squishy balls. She has a little Zen garden that has rocks and sand. She has just all kinds of, it's like, you know, a place for fun toy kind of things. Well, she told the story that just made me double over in pain about this little kid who's, I think, in 3rd grade. And his parents, he's on the spectrum. And of course, when I heard the story, I thought, well, no wonder he's on the spectrum. His parents don't touch him.
Yeah.
And so he was coming in to get hugs from her. And so she would give them to him, but it wasn't quite getting him, you know, like out of his funk. And so she's a very much of a live wire, so she was kind of trying to kid around with him one day, you know, get him a little cheered up. And she kind of poked him a little bit in the ribs, and he exploded into laughter. And she thought, well, maybe he's not getting something else. If he's not being touched and hugged, he's obviously not getting, being played with either. And the thing is that she knew this because they do a lot of home visits. And so they knew that Dad slept on one couch, this kid slept on another. Dad always, when he was awake, had a computer in his lap. The TV was going 24/7, and Mom was sort of drifting in and out of the picture, but not there, really, for the child. So extremely deprived conditions. So the kid was coming down. So when she found out about this tickling thing, she thought, well, just let me go with this. And so she took it a little bit more. It's like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. And he was so overjoyed that he could actually laugh when someone was playing with him. That, you know, it just changed his life. So now, 3 to 5 times a week, when he's dropped off at school, makes a beeline for the principal's office, gets hugs, gets tickled, says, okay, I'm ready to go. That's the kind of thing that they can do there because they understand about trauma-informed care, and they can say, all right, this isn't, you know, in the teacher's, manual, but I understand the manifestation of this, and so I can do something with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
My boyfriend's an elementary school teacher, and I'm just thinking of, you know, if a male teacher reaches for either a female or male student like that, that could have some consequences, you know, as far as touching, sexual abuse or something.
Right.
So how would they incorporate that?
Well, they understand that, I think they understand the difference of one thing, and I think that they encourage it because they know that in this case, this kid is getting no touching whatsoever, and so hugging is fine. And I have been in quite a few schools in the last few months, and I can walk into a school now and see if they're doing something, or if they're in terms of trauma-informed approaches or not. Where they are, the kids are happy, they feel safe, they feel secure. There's a lot of hugging. You know, kids are free to hug, they're free to get hugs. It's not to say that, you know, there might be somebody who does that, but in these schools where everybody's watching out for everybody else, you know, it's not just an isolated teacher in the classroom, which is another piece of this. Everybody's working together. I think it'd be really hard for someone to get away with something that's bad for a child.
It seems, again, at the school I was at, for the one teacher that was teaching. There was a teacher teaching preschool, and they were from children that came from, unusual situations, let's say, or difficult ones. But her personal view, because of the concern that's been put out there so greatly about touching children, a child would come up to her and she would say, "Oh no, don't hug me. You can go hug your friend." Well, it worked to a point, but then the child didn't feel, they were looking to the teacher as someone of importance who they looked up to. And it was even a sense of semi-rejection without being rejected. And for some of the children, it was confusing. But her assistants and others, she discouraged them hugging. And so it just, I was in there for a while kind of observing or whatever, and I thought that's really kind of sad. But they said that's how their program operated. So I hope your ACES gets around all over because I think they really need a hug once in a while.
Yeah, I do too. A lot of kids do. And also, it's just, I am also, grew up with a pedophile. So I understand this piece of it. But I tell you, if I didn't have the teachers I had who did hug me in an appropriate way, and friends who did the same, I wouldn't be where I am today. That was really important because it was either, I had two choices, a pedophile or someone who neglected me so much that when I drew a picture of her when I was in first grade, no arms, sort of traditional neglect.
Yes.
So I think that's an important thing.
Yes.
Anything else? Oh yeah, come.
A little bit more about personal healing, because I know a lot of the mothers in this room have experienced that their children are living with a pedophile and they can't stop that. What are your thoughts on how they can hope for their children and what the children can do when the children grow up, and mothers can do that when they grow up?
Well, from a personal journey point of view, definitely, if whatever you can to get that kid in contact, either in a good school or a church or whatever. But those other healthy adult people in that child's life are really, really, really important. And then not being isolated, that is really, really important. Having a good friend base, however that can be encouraged, it's so vital. If I didn't have my friends, I don't know what I would have done in high school. And then it's a long journey, there's no doubt about that. So when you finally have contact with your child and are able to start that healing process, it ain't gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take a long time. What's lucky now, as opposed to 40 years ago, is that people are much more open about this stuff now. And so I've been in high schools, like the high school in Walla Walla, mind blowing. The kids did their own ACE study, and they added questions to the 10-question ACE study. And when the principal told me about this, he said they went way too personal for me, But the kids really wanted that because, and it's public, anybody can look at it. There's a link to it from that story. And the kids told me, they said, we talk about it, we understand each other better. They are at a level where, maybe I got to when I was 40. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, talking, doing more. Yeah.
I think there is because of Facebook and all the social media. Kids today are just much, much more open and communicate with each other much, much better than we ever did when it was just a difference in the technology and the times.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I think, of course, there's still kids who are isolated, and that's not good, but at least the environment is not as isolating as it was, and people are more willing to talk about this than they were a long time ago. Okay, anything else? All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
I think we're done, right? Am I correct? So that would be it. So thank you to all the speakers and to everybody for coming today, and we'll be back next year. All right, thank you.